No, yeah. I mean, that's some powerful stuff, man.
Yeah, it is powerful. How does it read? Well, how do
Okay.
the two relate? How does all that great work you were just speaking of relate to Andre's question about this bill?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I saw. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Nick, so Nick, I heard you telling that story about that woman on Fox and Friends, and 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 I was concerned with a comment that you made about the group of protesters, how they decided that their First Amendment rights, and in your words, which I don't think exist on the middle of the freeway, trump her right to move freely. And how can our First Amendment rights
Uh,
be limited to certain
Areas and
spaces or
spaces.
times?
Yeah.
I found that very concerning.
Yep. No. Yep. Yeah, and that makes sense. I can get with that, right? So the part where I'm kind of wrestling with is that we keep looking at the the lower end as opposed to going upstream to see why, really addressing the concerns as to why protesters are protesting. And we also have to be real careful about the language that we use because there's a difference between a riot and a protest. Now, granted, I will tell you that my parents told me, excuse me, to be home by midnight. And they told me to be home by midnight because they knew that nothing good was happening after midnight. So, oh, a liberal and a conservative, huh? So, so, given that, like, what I know is that the death penalty doesn't stop murders. And I don't know that necessarily even creating fines or upping the ante, so to speak, to creating these criminal acts will actually dissuade people. Someone asked me a question on Facebook. They said, "Well, why are you concerned about a bill that says this?" And at first, I came up with all these rationales about it limiting free speech and so forth and so on. But I go back to Martin Luther King, and he went to jail. What he did was illegal, and he did it.
Hmm. And Andre, you commented rioting versus protesting, and again going back to that same video clip that I saw on Fox and Friends, and that was another concern. Twice in there, there was once where you said you have to be a criminal for this bill to be applied. You have to be a criminal, and then you should have to pay for your riot. And then at the end of the clip, again, it was pay for their riot. And just in the media, that wording, I think it's giving people like me who are hesitant to attend a protest. I would be even more hesitant to go to a protest if I believe that others are going to view me as a rioter or inciting violence in a riot, as opposed to wanting to peacefully share my viewpoints. Um, I found that concerning. And do you think they really wanted a confrontation or just to be heard? And that the only way they were going to be heard is to make a disruption like this. That's where I mean, and that's the challenge: is how are they going to be heard?
Yeah, no, yeah, I get that. No, and I get that, and that makes sense. So one of the things I'm curious about, is so I just did a show with a number of Metro police officers and one of the, police chiefs, and one of the things I thought was very interesting was that the folks who have the closest relationship, that have to deal with protests on a regular basis, have a different viewpoint than municipalities where talking about this seems to be much more of a luxury than it is an actual confrontation kind of thing. I know in the metro there's a certain kind of relationship that is being built with the so-called protesters. Do you think those? Oh, and I went to Owatonna. It was really interesting. I went to Owatonna and did a training. We had about 50 people come out to kind of talk about this idea of Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, which in fact all are true for different reasons, and we don't have to make a false choice. But that seemed to be a luxury for them more so than a conversation that needs to be had. So how would you encourage people to in outlining areas outside of the Minneapolis and St. Paul or even Hennepin County to engage, or Ramsey County, to engage in conversations that you might find more productive, that don't lead to the impression of a riot versus or have to even have this dichotomy of a riot versus a protest. So what do you see as a way for people to demonstrate their frustrations, so called productively? Yeah. So, I think one of the things that we can't tell the future about is that I know that I saw this in Jurassic Park, life will find a way, right? So, right. You know what's happening next, right? So I think one of the things that I know in my faith community that we always oftentimes talk about is that you can't legislate a heart change, and it sounds like there are lots of people who have taken on this tactic that will ramp it up. That will use this tactic and find other tactics to get their message heard. And so I guess I do take some solace in the fact that you're having some of these conversations about systemic issues that people are trying to get to be heard, but for whatever reason, they're not getting heard. And so I hope that those lines of communication down at the legislature continue to expand so that other voices can be heard and that the people's voice can be recognized. Brian, you had something. I was just looking at you.
Oh, yeah, I was just listening to some of your comments, Nick, and about the importance of people sharing their opinions and being heard, and then yeah, at the same time, um, seeing an article about you criticizing Governor Dayton for his comments, after the shooting of Philando Castile, that his comments that he does not think Castile would have been shot if he had been white, and and then your quote of that the governor just made things worse by voicing his opinion about the officer's racial motivations, and yet these are the conversations that we need to be having, and how do I don't understand it. It confuses me.
Yeah, no doubt. But hindsight's 2020, right? Hindsight's 2020. Was Governor Dayton right in that comment? I mean, that's what John Choi first basically said supported everything the governor said. So is the governor prophetic, or is he is he just in tune with what's going on, or did he really overstep his bounds in his initial response and the facts now are catching up to his
Yeah,
ultimate outcome?
and I guess that was the question in my mind, Nick, was did you think Governor Dayton was wrong in what by wrong
In what
about
he
what he
said, or
wrong about what
wrong
he
in the
thought,
timing?
wrong about what he believed, or that he just should not have voiced his opinion? Well, it is risky to I just think it.
Yep.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. Well, well, let me tell you, St. Paul Hotel is a great place to go. I'm just telling you. So if I got to go run somewhere, that's exactly where I'm running to. No, I think that. Yep. Yeah. No. Yep. No, and I'll give you kind of a counter story to that. That for a person who was not going to go out and necessarily participate in that way, I participated in another way. It was extremely cathartic to hear someone in power at least take in the idea of what the community of what some community members may have already been feeling, and so to hear no, and I hear what you're saying about being irresponsible and that kind of stuff by on the governor's part or not. We know that your jobs are typically different than our jobs as community members. So there's certain luxuries you're afforded that we're not necessarily so when I'm in a fight I got to stay there and fight it. So but it was for some of us who to hear an elected official state a suspicion that the rest of us had, or in many cases had been confirmed by the act itself of, given the nature of how a lot of these events were at that particular time really building. I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems like there's been a cooling off period of police shootings. And I know that still happens and crime happens and they have to do what they need to do. And I am pro police all day long. I'm calling them when I need them. But I think at that particular time, there was a lot of heat. And if anything, I think that was a release of a pressure cooker that was happening. And I don't know, and I don't know the minds of folks who, go out or their goals, but I do know that for someone who had that as a suspicion, to hear an elected official at least confirm the possibility that my suspicion was at least validated, not even.
Yeah, and I think Nick's right that it was a risky statement for the
It was
government to
risky.
make, and I think that's what people need to be doing is taking more risks like that and talking about it more. I applaud him for saying it personally.
Yeah, and Nick, I want to say this line of questioning, these conversations that we're having right now, is the nature of kind of how Brian and I work with with our podcast and with our guests. And I want to say, before we go any further, I appreciate you engaging in this conversation because this is the kind of risk that Brian is talking about that needs to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate it too, Nick. And this is a lot of stuff that I haven't wanted to talk about myself and haven't wanted to face or haven't needed to face, and just coming from a place of privilege. And so I appreciate you having a conversation like this with us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Nick, on a sidebar, I just want to know: do you still have the Hummer? Sweet. Oh, Nick was
Well,
like one of
save on gas a little
yeah,
bit.
he was like one of the first guys I knew who had a was it an H2? It was a yeah, yeah. He was, don't don't. Well, cool, Nick. Again, I want to say thank you for joining us. And
Yeah,
what,
thanks, Nick. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
I think that particularly given the nature of the world we're living in, we're not. People would rather go to their fake news source, right, as
Yep.
opposed to really having wrestling with some real conversations. So, I appreciate you doing that with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Oh,
What?
wow. Oh, wow.
Wow. Oh,
Oh,
okay. Who knew? Who knew?
now we do.
Fair enough. That's our democratic process, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Yeah. All right. So, no, no thanks, man. And you and I will have to sit down and do some coffee offline. All right. Cool, cool, cool.
Take care, Nick.
Taking care. It's great to hear you're doing well, and God bless to your family. All right.
Bye bye.
Bye. So that was Nick Zarwask. So, what did you think, man?